Thanks for tuning in to Sweet Stories in the Dell. It's a podcast about what makes Sweet Briar College truly unique. My name is Caperton Morton. I'm an audio storyteller and a Sweet Briar alum. This is episode 2 at the core, but if you haven't listened to episode 1, stop now. Listen to it first. You'll get a better understanding of who President Meredith Woo is, and that will help you better understand her vision ahead for the college. While I was on campus last January gathering interviews, I was able to sit down with President Woo to talk about the core curriculum. Then, after the college transitioned to remote learning due to COVID-19, I spoke with some others through Skype.
I was brought up in another culture. I have traveled the world. I think I have an insight as an outsider that sometimes even people who are insiders don't always have.
When President Woo arrived on campus, she began looking at Sweet Briar with new eyes. She stepped back for a broader view, even looking back in time at Sweet Briar's legacy. And from these multidimensional views and others, she began building a vision that reflects our unique strengths as an institution.
As you know, we made a big change in our curriculum, that instead of having generic liberal arts program, and by that what I mean is if you take number of classes from various divisions in the liberal arts, then after that you can go on to major in whatever you want to major in, and then voila, you are an educated woman. Well, instead of that, we wanted to do something far more intentional and focused.
In 2017, before President Woo was hired, the faculty formed the Academic Initiatives Committee, or the AIC. They voted in 4 faculty members, including Jeff Key, an associate professor of political science.
I've come back to Sweet Briar. I was at Sweet Briar from 1990 until 2006, and then I was away for 10 years, and then some friends called me and said, would you consider coming back? I said, sure, I'll come back, and so I did, and we've enjoyed it. I teach, we call it political science now, but alums would have remembered government and international affairs. President Woo came in and she said, we need to work over some things. Taking that initial planning document, or no, it wasn't a planning document, but the white paper was a thought piece, and we took off from there.
The AIC solicited proposals from groups of self-selected faculty who came up with their own visions of what a valuable core could be.
And we put together some of the best pieces of half a dozen different fully fleshed out proposals.
After really intensive thinking about what the new core ought to look like, faculty said leadership is where it's at. We all sat down and we asked ourselves, what is leadership? And it was actually a perilous notion, this notion of leadership, because a lot of colleges focus on leadership, either implicitly or explicitly. But implicitly, all colleges focus on producing leaders, right? And so, when Princeton University says Princeton in service of the nation, that means leadership. University of Virginia has a Batten School of Leadership. Leadership ethos pervades these places. So we asked ourselves, what has Sweet Briar wrought over the last 116 years? Who are these women? So I began writing down attributes. And there was something very unusual about Sweet Briar women. These are women who get things done. They know how to roll up their sleeves. They can identify problems. They can solve problems. These are women who know how to collaborate, how to work in a team, how to encourage the team, and above all, have the ethics of responsibility and accountability. And I thought, I saw a whole lot of women like this among the women I've met who were shaped by the experience at Sweetbriar. I said, why wouldn't we look at these traits as the traits fundamentally of leadership? And I thought, this is female leadership. This is exactly the leadership we need in the 21st century. So we said, let's do it. We can define what leadership is in the context of Sweetbriar. We're just going to do it much more intentionally.
President Woo and the faculty also asked the question, can leadership be taught? And they came up with two answers, yes and no.
It can't be taught because sometimes leadership comes through experience, through life, and through wisdom, and you can't learn it in the classroom entirely. There are some things that can be taught in the period of 4 years while they stay at Sweetbriar, and it can be extended throughout life so that they can continue to improve upon themselves as leaders. Our leadership core is unique. It's habits of the mind, discipline of the mind that we're focused on that is conducive to producing leaders of tomorrow.
It's designed intentionally with 10 courses spread out across not so much knowledge fields, but understanding fields. It's this idea of equipping young women with the tools to go out into the world and to be part of things bigger than themselves.
There are 10 leadership core courses, and they are unique. You can read the course descriptions online at sbc.edu under academics, but President Woo describes the gist of them.
Some of it would be familiar to you by looking at other leadership programs. One focuses on decision-making, and decision-making can be taught in many different ways. For instance, right now we're teaching it in terms of statistics, because statistics is the science of decision-making. We do problem solving through a method called design thinking. We teach persuasive writing. We teach arts appreciation because that's very important for understanding our civilization and empathy. We also, and this is really critical, teach ethical thinking because it is important. The most important quality in leadership is taking responsibility and being accountable. And then we also have a course that's unusual, but I like to call it citizen science, meaning that we try to teach scientific concepts that are complex, but without which we cannot understand big debates that we're all engaged in today, such as climate change, such as social consequences of artificial intelligence, right? And such as some of the breakthroughs in medical science and other things. Other than that, I think that there are certain areas of emphasis that you won't find anyplace else, and that are specific to what I believe is special to women leadership core. One is the notion that women really have to get better in terms of financial thinking, because women have been at some distance from power and wealth in many ways, or decision-making about wealth, that women are not always as profound to think about financial consequences and implications of their daily decisions. The other thing is a unique curriculum that's evolving about stewardship of our built and natural environment. And so that places a lot of focus on sustainability, conservation, preservation, because women are terrific stewards, have always been, of our society and our built and natural environment, and they will be called upon to do more of that in the 21st century.
The core is probably the most disruptive, in a positive way, force for change that really in 30 years I haven't seen people generally, animatedly be supportive of group efforts to make something happen. Faculty are really cooperating. around things. They're finding ways to support one another. And this core is like a catalyst. It's creating heat, it's creating light, it's creating energy, it's making a reaction take place. It's actually making more sense the longer we persist with it. This is a case where we're doing what we purport to be doing. The 10 core series in the leadership core, that contributes to those young people's understanding of what they will be able to do when they get out.
The second of the 10 core courses is Core 120, The Mindful Writer. One of the professors who teaches this course is Carrie Brown. Carrie is a professor of English and creative writing, as well as the director of the Center for Creativity, Design, and the Arts. She's published 8 novels and has won multiple awards for her writing.
Oh, The Mindful Writer. I love The Mindful Writer. Well, we wanted to create something that was a little different than the standard English composition class, which is offered out there in the world. But we hope that as a platform for students who may not feel very confident about their reading and writing skills, that it gives them an opportunity to practice. And I had developed a course that used the New Yorker as its text and wanted to see if that would be a good model for a class that asked students to both practice their reading skills and simultaneously practice their writing skills, and also had the kind of ancillary benefit of just teaching them a whole lot about what was happening in the world, especially, of course, what was happening in terms of politics and what was happening in terms of the climate, what was happening in terms of international affairs, what was happening in terms of cultural shifts. I think the course has been quite successful. Students have an individual 12-week subscription to the New Yorker. So they're reading the New Yorker magazine very intensively for 12 weeks. And then they're practicing writing the kinds of pieces that might appear in the New Yorker. So they're learning a variety of rhetorical styles and methods. They're learning to address a general audience, and they're practicing their voices as writers and as communicators.
I mean, it's wherever their interests lie.
Well, it's very hard to write something about a topic that you're not very interested in. But if you can help the students discover the things that they are interested in, they do much better. So, I mean, students have really created some remarkable pieces. There was a student from Colorado who wrote about what had happened to the state since the legalization of marijuana, and specifically what the effects have been on the public school system. That was a fascinating piece. God, I'm like drawing a blank, but they've just, if you let them write about the things that interest them and let them do some research and develop those skills, they really do quite remarkable work.
I'm Lucy Wasserstein. I'm a student at Briar. I'm a sophomore currently from New York City, and I'm majoring in psychology.
The publication, The Mindful Writer, named for the core course, is distributed within the Briar community. It's set up like the New Yorker magazine, and the articles are written by Mindful Writer students. Among the articles I read was Turing Tried and Turing Tested, The Rise of Artificial Intelligence, written by Lucy Wasserstein. It's a great example of the interdisciplinary nature of the core courses.
I definitely do agree. It's a lot easier and just a lot more fun to write about something that you are interested in, less of a slog. I mean, I'm just really interested in AI and it's just general technology and how it will be advancing over the next however many years. And I did some research on how the discipline of computer science got started, how the invention of artificial intelligence and all of that, how that played into computer science. I also sent out a survey to people in my dorm about their opinions on artificial intelligence, what they think about, Siri, like Cortana, Alexa, all these virtual assistants, what they use them for, all this stuff. They're just their general attitudes on modern technology. I just all incorporated it into an article that I thought would be interesting.
I asked Lucy what the Mindful Writer class did for her writing and her confidence as a writer.
Well, it definitely increased my confidence. So I guess the class was successful. Carrie, as a professor, I love her so much. She's amazing. She really helped us. Her feedback is it's incredible. It's so good. We're doing a lot of peer work as well, and we help each other out with edits and, give them advice and all of that. And I think not only does it help you find your voice as a writer, you learn how to, give better criticism as well.
And then we bring in a New Yorker staff writer, a woman, every year to talk to the students. And those have been just wonderful. So Rebecca Mead came the first year. Ariel Levy came this past fall, and I've lined up Gia Tolentino to come in the fall of 2020, which I'm incredibly excited about.
How did you come up with the idea of using the New Yorker as a text?
So I have been getting the New Yorker, thanks to my Uncle Jim, and loving it since I was about 12 years old because I loved it. I knew already that I wanted to be a writer, and he was thrilled by that. And he gave me a subscription until he died last year at the age of 92. It's just like having the world open itself at your feet. And to me, that just felt like an immense gift to the students.
Carrie also has some valuable thoughts about the reformation of the core curriculum.
I think it's really important to remember, and it's certainly important for us on the faculty to remember, that curricular reform in general for most academic institutions is something that takes years. And it takes reams of consultants and task forces. And, it is not a process that happens quickly. Sweetbriar is small, and so it can afford to do it more quickly, but still to have overhauled the curriculum here as dramatically as it has been overhauled since 2015 is really quite an extraordinary feat. And to do it in a way that is as visionary as President Woo wanted it to be is even more of a feat.
Next is Core 130, Women and Gender in the World. Professors teaching it approach it in different ways. Jeff Key decided to format his class as a global women's conference. Each student researched the country they represented and came to class prepared for discussions.
It was unlike any course I've taught because I was facilitating interaction among students on their projects of individual interest in parts of the world that were interesting to them. It was a class of 50 students, and generally every class they were meeting with delegates from their region of the world and talking about the problems of women in their country or their region. And then ultimately we came together. We were able to get that done, part of it done before COVID-19, before spring break.
Jeff and other professors of this course invite women speakers to share and discuss their experiences in their places of work. And many of these speakers come from the greater Sweetbriar community of Amherst County, the town of Amherst, and nearby cities.
We had the Board of Supervisors came from Amherst County this semester and talked to the class. I had the head of Miriam's House. It's a shelter for homeless women and children. The students, they're alive to those things that are local to them. They live a lot of their lives online and following national and international issues, but they find that what's going on locally resonates with them in an immediate way. And gosh, just having visits in class sometimes has spurred people to pursue internships and start rethinking what their priorities are about what they're doing here at Sweetbriar and what they plan to do after it. So it's surprising, but at the same time, it's not surprising. They just haven't been exposed to it. Both Kimberly Morse-Jones and myself use other faculty members to come in. And for instance, this semester, back in February, I had Dan Lee from economics come in and talk about the wage gap. And it was really eye-opening to the students because you look at the notion of a wage gap as as just a fact. And you say, okay, there's a difference. Women are paid 20% less than men on average. So what an economist does is unpack that. So, okay, what kind of choices are being made? And he was able to cite, for instance, all kinds of data from economic research about how people, when they're hired, the degree to which they negotiate. And there is data that suggests that women tend not to negotiate. And that's where you get the bigger salaries. And that was important for the students to hear, because to hear just the statement, women are paid less, there's no action, there's no charge to do things differently other than protest. Well, protesting's fine, but you don't have to protest if everyone simply starts saying, no, I'll take this job, but I need this. And it gets us past this sort of idea that things have to either blow up or stay the same. We have the capacity to change as a country. We have the capacity to change as a college, and students are a big part of that. I couldn't think of a place I'd rather be right now. It's interesting, and I told students, I said, I'll state the obvious the first day. I'm old, I'm white, I'm male. I said, this is not who I am. These are all attributes that you can see. That's all the same kind of labeling that I try to avoid doing, and I ask you not to do it to me. And this was not a stretch for me. Gosh, I'd done my doctoral dissertation in Pakistan, and most of that work was with women's groups. And I shared some of my stories the first day about my experiences in developing countries to study NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and sort of backing into feminism. It changed me, and it made me more empathetic, absolutely more empathetic.
I'm Cailey Cobb. I recently graduated of the class of 2020. I was a business major, originally from Tyler, Texas. I think of one class that really affected how I learned at Sweetbriar. It was a class called Women and Gender in the World. It was a debate class.
Cailey's professors Mike Burnell, who teaches Spanish, and Kimberly Morse-Jones, an associate professor of art history, formatted their teaching of Core 130 by reaching back into Sweetbriar's forgotten history.
So we went in the library, and there's nothing more empowering than standing on a debate balcony in one of the most beautiful libraries in the country and discussing different women's rights issues.
The Mary Helen Cochran Library is truly beautiful. Architect Ralph Adams Cram designed Sweetbriar's campus, including the library, which opened in 1929. In fact, his design included 2 debate balconies, one at each end of the main reading room. And until researching the college architecture, I had no idea that those balconies had any use at all. And neither Cailey nor her professor, Kimberly Morse-Jones, know when the debate balconies were last used. Elle Werner, my friend, classmate, and one of my Pod Squad editors, told me she didn't know either. Her debate class in the early 80s met in Babcock, and they debated in the auditorium. So I contacted my friend Carol McMurtry Fowler, class of 1957. And I have to admit, I was surprised that even Carol had no idea the balconies were designed for debate. So that takes us back to 1953, when Carol came to Sweetbriar as a freshman. Now, Kimberly and I are both going to dig deeper, looking for some answers, and we agreed to keep each other informed. I'll let you know if we unearth any new information.
Cram built those debate balconies for academic debate, academic forums. Early in our history, we wanted women outspoken in academic settings, and the structure of our building showed that. It has had a resurgence, which is really special to be able to get to use the space in a way that it was designed to be used and that a modern woman can interact with. It was so fascinating to hear the different perspectives of students, and the different biases that people had. And you get to hear people's stories through their opinions and through what they believe. It may not be an argument that you agree with. I still don't know if I agree with the argument that I was put into, but it made me become such a better orator and be more compassionate towards another person disagreeing with me by having to know both sides.
Now I skip ahead to the last of the 10 core courses, the Capstone, which is Core 300, the Consequential Citizen. President Woo taught this course during the spring semester, and please keep in mind that President Woo and I spoke last January.
The description for the course said that as the capstone, this was time for students to reflect upon what their learning in leadership was like. And so, I'm asked to create a reflective space. So I thought that gives me some freedom. Reflective space can be anything. So I thought that we create that space by taking advantage of what is really unusual and fantastic about Sweet Briar, that it is situated in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It was the most powerful state in colonial times and in the founding of the Republic. There were 7 presidents coming from Virginia in the first 12 presidents in this country. So this is obviously a state that produces great leaders. And, there are substantial presidential homes in the state which can serve as classroom for our students.
Classes like Consequential Citizen, where there's heavy discussion on heavy topics like slavery, like injustice. It's so interesting to hear the different perspectives of what a leader should be and what a leader can be. President Woo is, like you said, super observant, and I think that was an expectation of the class, is to look at the details, to look deeper. And as you look deeper, you find those hidden stories.
Before the campus closed for remote learning, the plan was that President Woo would take the class to 2 of Thomas Jefferson's homes, Monticello and his summer home, Poplar Forest. They'd also visit James Monroe's Ash Lawn, James Madison's Montpelier, and George Washington's Mount Vernon. Cailey mentioned that by the time the class transitioned to remote learning, they had visited Mount Vernon and Montpelier in person. Back in January, I asked President Woo if there had been any surprises since the class had begun, or during their visit to Mount Vernon.
Well, so far, no surprises except for really positive ones. But, when I take the students to Mount Vernon, you might think that we're going there to understand the leadership of George Washington. And of course, that is important. We learn about what he's done, and we learn about what he thought. We learn, above all, about his decision-making process, how he looked at conflicting situations and what reasons he used to reach the conclusion that he did. So all of that is important. It's also important to understand his leadership style, the way he comported himself, the way he picked his clothes, the way he cared deeply about those things. But what we do is a little bit subversive. We're not there to simply understand George Washington. We're there to also understand people and leaders who may not always be visible, but who've done a great deal to make sure that our history means something. So for me, that means to really try to understand the impact of Mount Vernon Ladies Association.
The Mount Vernon Ladies Association is an all-women governing board founded in 1857. These founding women saw it as their responsibility to steward history. They had the forethought that Mount Vernon and its artifacts could help in the understanding of our country's founding principles.
So it's a very important legacy. So I want to tell you a funny story. We go to Mount Vernon. I'm looking at the pictures of the 24 vice regents, and guess what? I know a lot of Sweet Briar alums, and I spot that there are 2 alumni of Sweet Briars, and one person who is deeply connected to Sweet Briar, although she didn't graduate from there. I thought that was interesting. 3 out of 24. I thought this needs to be investigated.
It was really special to hear President Woo be proud and the presence that Sweet Briar has across the country.
So I called up an alumna called Gay Gaines. I think she might have been regent from 2003 to 2007. So I said, Gay, How is it possible that out of 24 vice regents, the governing board of Mount Vernon, I noticed 3 Sweetbriar associated people? And she said, "Oh, Meredith, in my time, sometimes it looked like majority. There were so many Sweetbriar women. In terms of how many there might have been, why don't you call Vaughn Morzette? Vaughn was a regent, so I call up Vaughn." And Vaughn says, "Oh, in my time, there were 6, 7 Sweetbriar women who were on that board." So that's really interesting. And I'm thinking it's not really coincidence that this happens. Sweetbriar women are a particular kind of women, and I think they really move history.
President Woo nailed it. Generations of Sweetbriar women have led and continue to lead in ways as unique as each woman, whether we're Mount Vernon trustees, fiercely saving Sweetbriar, or working in business, science, or higher ed. And generations of Sweetbriar students have led on campus too. Students are currently helping with plans to resume in-person classes and residential living this fall. And as always, they're suggesting changes that help spur the evolution of the entire Sweetbriar community. So actually, we're in great company with President Woo at our helm. After all, she seems to be quite a mover of history herself. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you come back for more sweet stories in the Dell. Take care.